I have this
Mhm.
elasticated one that has these elastic tensional elements, so it doesn't exactly communicate in the same way. It doesn't display that kind of omnidirectional communication because this is made of elastic versus something that's
Yeah.
truly tensional.
Mhm.
And so I also brought this push puppet to
That's
demonstrate
cool.
that idea that when this cable that keeps this push puppet in its structural integrity is soft, is loose, is not tensioned, the
Yeah.
thing loses its shape. And
Yeah.
so it's through the tensioning that it has its structural integrity.
Yeah.
So I thought this was sort of a in lieu of an actual tensegrity, displaying that kind of emergent property of when tension and compression is combined, we have form and we have volume.
Ah, great. I love it. I got to get one of those. And Cecilia
Brilliant.
says
Yeah, brilliant.
elasticity and adaptability. And before we move on to Nuno, let's just feel that a little bit in our own bodies. And because we can also feel how tension and compression are synergistic, how they co-create each other. Now, if you have a long sleeve, my sleeves are really long, so we'll have to make them really short. If you have a long sleeve shirt on, bend your elbows up and gather in and hold the inside with your elbows bent a little bit like a fetus. If you've got a short sleeve, you can put your hands here. I'm just gonna actually spotlight the video, maybe. Okay, so well, in the biotensegrity concept, we are considering all living organisms. Now I'll talk about this whole body as being under tensegrity force dynamics on many, many scales. So not just the soft tissue and the bones, as I had originally been thinking about biotensegrity when I was thinking of tensegrity as a thing, a structure, but within the bones, within the tissues, within the cells. Okay, so let's make this system even bigger. So it now is going to include my shirt. Now at this point, it's my sleeves are a little bit by, what is your guy called from Toy Story? I forget his name. You know, a little bit when he's collapsed. Now,
Woody.
what's his name? Woody, that's it. So like the collapsed Woody. So I can feel that in the fact that, well, let's just try the opposite and then we'll compare. Now, with these sleeves, I'm going to start to grow my arms out. That's giving this compressive, I'm pressing out, pushing out until now you, you can see that the shirt is taut. Now it's tensioned. Can you feel it?
Bye.
So if you bend your elbows so the tension is gone, does it feel like one system? Can you move one arm? Well, thinking about the sweater, now not your whole body, because I can feel my whole body moving, but compare that to stretching out, whether it be this way or this way. And now, when your system is tensioned, globally tensioned, when you've got that continuous tension, what happens now if I reach out with one arm or reach out with the other and let my whole body respond? So I can become slack like Woody, or I can offer that compressive force to the sweater and I feel how the sweater becomes tensioned. Now, if I don't have that compressive force, the tension isn't there. The tension and compression are synergistic or
No compression
co-created.
without tension, no tension without compression.
Tell me again, Yap, I didn't hear.
No tension without compression, no compression without tension.
Right, very good.
That's the polarity.
That's a polarity. And then you have a whole system, which
Yeah.
is, I don't know your language, but
And the system is the third dimension.
The system is the third dimension.
Yeah.
And could you feel what happened to the communication through the sweater when there was that third dimension? Anybody? Yeah? No?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Sure.
Was that a helpful exercise?
Yeah, very.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank
so what I'm having a difficulty with is the difference between the string structures where there's not elasticity between the struts and the ones that have elasticity that have elasticity in between the struts, because the exercise you just showed and that we just did, there is that elasticity in the moving through the whole structure via the struts, compression, tension. So
Yeah, and we use these ones with non-elastic strings because they show a responsiveness. Now, people who are like Danielle Claude Martin, for example, she uses the elastic strings because in our bodies, we think of these forces as being under constant and dynamic change. We're constantly reconfiguring. We can't model that with, at least I don't think anybody can. People are trying, but that's very difficult to model with the non-stretchy strings. Now, what you will find, and I'll try and find a video to put up with the replay or somewhere, what you will find is that there is some elasticity in this. Somebody even wrote it down. Cecilia wrote down the emergent property of elasticity and adaptability. So what is this can expand, and then I release it and it goes back again.
this is with the string, the non-elastic string.
Yeah, this is non-elastic string. So with this, you can expand it, and then when you release it, it springs back. You can compress it, and when you release it, it springs back. So one of the emergent properties is this elasticity. Now, we're not considering our body. I mean, we have those fantastic models. If you watch the Tea Party from just a few weeks back, Mike Olean is making these models. And so you can create models that mimic the structures of the body. But the biotensegrity hypothesis is not that we're made of icosahedrons, tensegrity icosahedrons. It's that the force dynamics of tensegrity is the force dynamics in all living organisms and in our bodies and on all scales. So the elasticity of this would be multiplied as we start multiplying the layers and the scales of tensegrity force dynamics. Does that?
Right, so it's at the cellular, from say cellular micro to macro, that same principle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if this is confusing the issue or not, but I like thinking about this.
Let me spotlight you. You keep talking.
As like, if I was thinking about it inside the body, you could also say that this string is all made of tiny little tensegrities, and this post is made of all kinds of different tiny tensegrities, and they're all nested inside of each other, working together. So like, no matter what scale you're working on, everything is showing that balanced interplay between tensegrity and compression. I mean, not tensegrity, tension and compression. So those two things are always synergistically working together.
And that balanced interplay such that the compression elements are suspended within this matrix of tension, of continuous tension, which is different than thinking of the compression elements as stacked. And the difference, we can determine that difference by considering the properties of this model. And when you hold one, and I saw you had one, and when you hold one and you move one, even when it's made with elastic strings or tendons, when you consider the properties of this compared to the properties of my stack of bricks or books, you have to deal with them very differently. If you had, I mean, we've all moved boxes, stacks of boxes or bricks, and we know that we have to manage these very differently than we have to, well, if you've had one of these, then we have to manage this. I mean, if I drop these, even if they were tied together with that elastic, they're more likely to fall apart than if I drop my tensegrity, which you didn't see because I didn't move my camera. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I'm actually happily surprised to see the movement in the structures that are connected with string as opposed to more elastic structures. So that just kind of gives another depth of dimension of understanding of the whole idea.
Yeah, and this is why we really encourage, and the model that Gwen had, we've got a little course. We encourage you to make your own. I mean, that's one of the first things that we encourage people to do, because you can learn so much by building this. When you saw the video and it just popped into volume, it changes dramatically. If you're like me, and that is an experiential, like a kinesthetic learner, it teaches us so much. And it's really hard. We are working with concepts that we didn't grow up with. And so the more ways we can find to support our learning, the better. And Betsy Ann, I believe you're a body worker. You know a lot intuitively through what you've learned in your hands and what your hands tell you.
Yes.
When you have even this, one of the first ones with one string I built is quite large. And I remember I took it to like yoga teacher trainings, and you can't see it very well, but just somebody, she was sitting there and just mesmerized by the movement of the icosahedron, and it was bringing up so much for her because it actually could feel the echo of it in her heartbeat, in her breath. And I really do encourage you to build one of your own. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions before we move on? And you're welcome. Thank you so much for asking.
Nuno was supposed to speak.
Oh, Nuno, thank you. Yeah, Nuno, where are you, Nuno?
I'm here. Thank you, Yab. Hi. Yeah, we were talking in our group. I was with Betsy Ann, so we had that question of seeing, of trying to exactly see what was asked. And for the first time, and I've been studying with you, Chris, Gwen, and Yap, many others, for more than 2 years now. And I can tell you that for the first time, by seeing the questions of someone that is starting to see these principles now, I saw my question and I saw the way that I can now, I realized that I can now have a different sense than at the beginning I had. Because for me, I really didn't understood why what the buzz about using elastics instead of tight strings. Although I have built my own tensegrity several, and I felt the need to perceive the properties, the emergent properties from one or the other. But for the first time, I realized that this is not about the object, and this comes from what you just said, from the mandala. I still try to see the object in its integrity instead of seeing the verb. And by connecting it to a phrase that the other day Carol Davis said while talking about these confusions, noun, verb, she said, this is just about a force field.
Mm-hmm.
And these expression force field, you looking at the body and seeing a force field, or looking at it in integrity and not seeing the object but seeing a force field independently of seeing struts and strings, that they can be invisible, but this is just a way to have them more visible, which sometimes for me it confused me, because I see something objective, material, and I try to perceive that in my material or in another body's material, let's say. And we were talking about in the group with Betsy and others, Mary Broadwell, etc., about the difference in soft tissue response. And there was the thing of, can the more elastic material represent a more elastic tissue in the body, and the tighter one represent a tighter tissue in the body? And I think this is a very logic and very good question from someone that is looking at the tensegrity and knows the body, because we know the body has these different phase changes, touch perception in the tissue. So this was basically the confusion that we had. I couldn't explain what I've been learning for 20 something years. I hope I didn't make a bigger confusion now, but those are the confusions that keep popping up within the discussions, and I think are very, very important to be lightened up. Thank you, Etienne.
Thank you, Nuno, and thank you, Jaap, for bringing this up again. And Gwen's got a video queued up for us to watch that just gives us another sense of invisible forces that might really help other people have this insight that you've just had. It's just another doorway in. So you can start that video whenever you wish, Gwen. And thank you, Nuno. I always love to hear what you have to add. Okay, let's just watch this video first then. This is just to show, if you can pause it if you pull it apart and pause it, like when they're apart. So it's apart before I let go. Can you make it not touch? Yeah, no, never mind. If you can just imagine this with the magnets held apart and without the words on top, then you would not know. Oh, there's a force there. Has everybody played with magnets? Probably. There's a force there. If you couldn't see the words on top and you saw me and I told you those were two magnets and that there is a powerful force that I can feel, you might get a gist of that because you've played with magnets. But until I let go, you wouldn't know if that was a pulling force or a pushing force. And as soon as she puts the video on, now you know it's a force of attraction. It's a pulling force.
Yeah.
Whereas if we had the same side and I let go, what would happen? Again, that force is invisible, but we can see the impact of it. We can see the action that the force, thanks, Gwen, that the force gives us. So thank you, Gwen, for thinking about that. Was that a useful demonstration for people?
Well,
So the same this also represents forces. And it's a huge jump. Here is, I mean, you can see that the forces are changing, being redirected. What I could feel is that the tension is getting stronger, and the tension is getting stronger, and that is the minimal resting state, the minimal energy state when I let go and it's just holding its own shape. Okay, I don't know if that made sense, but go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I don't know. This is just a thought I had in the breakout room, and I was just wondering if there's any applicability to it regarding the you know, that model that you showed that where the piece was you had tripped over it, you know. So I noticed that in that particular structure, the whole thing didn't fall apart. It just kind of got, you know, one part of it fell apart, but other parts didn't, because I'm assuming the notches and the string, where there was a certain friction between them that kept them relatively in place. They may have lost some tension, but they didn't lose. And I'm wondering if there's an analogy to the body in some way, that there are certain, you know, maybe structures or areas that sort of provide, that are just, and this is working off of what Nuno said, that there are certain areas where there is less, how did he put it? Elasticity or something, or less, yeah, where there's less elasticity. Anyway, I don't know, it's just in terms of thinking about the body, that impressed me as being an interesting thing. Like, you see how the top of that is, you know, the smaller area of that is still together, but it's, so if you can imagine a situation in which all of that tension structure, that continuous tension structure would be so well lubricated, or so, you know, constructed of something that was so slick that once something happened, everything else would fall apart. Is that possible? I don't know.
I'm going to invite some of our other people to respond to this. Maybe Susan has a response, or maybe Nuno, or Yap, or someone else. But what I would say is that in this particular model, we can think of these as separate cells.
Got it.
These are a stack of icosahedrons.
Mhm.
So they're systems within themselves, within a greater system. So this is a great demonstration of what Gwen was talking about the I don't know if she used the word fractality, but these scales and scales and scales, and the force dynamics are, it's not so simple. We could zero in on one level, like maybe a strand of collagen, or we could zero out or zoom out, excuse me, to the level of the whole body. And yet we have all of these systems. Now, so what happens is that the tension, the changes in tension and compression in this lower one influence the whole, right? You could see that influence the whole. And in a really pure tensegrity, increasing tension here, I believe, would increase tension here. But this is not, you know, this is handmade. It doesn't have that same impact because, well, it's not a pure tensegrity. But I'm not sure if that helps at
Yeah.
all. Pardon?
I'm sorry, did you say, what did you just say?
I'm not sure if that answers your
Oh,
question.
no, it does. It does, actually. Yeah.
Very good. Let me just check the time here. We're doing pretty good. Are there anybody else that would like to respond to Bob here? No? Okay. Let's continue on then. So the emergent properties, there's so many emergent properties. No tension without compression, no compression without tension. That was Yap. And I feel that throughout my body when something is less fluid. I feel it elsewhere. Louisa says, so if there is a damaged area of the body, it would respond in a similar way to the broken tensegrity structure. Some areas would be fine. I'm going to invite maybe Susan to respond to that, but I do want to say yes. And
Hi.
so we break, you know, we might break a bone, and that area is where you see the most of that quote unquote damage. And yeah, it does influence the whole body.
Yeah, I find that a lot. I got people coming in going, I've got pain here. And I go, let me check your ankles.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the whole body does work as a whole, and you can't just reduce it just to the shoulder. It might be the shoulder has the ability to speak, whereas the part that's actually the problem has been muted for so long that it's not able to kind of voice its, pay attention to me. And so we find this in manual therapy that we are looking further afield, not just to the point that someone comments on this hurts. We have to take the body as a global unit and then kind of work out, follow the trail. Where do we start? Well, like I had a guy the other day, he says, he had problems with his left side, but I went to his right hip, and he went, why did you do that? I said, well, actually, that's where your problem is. And it's not allowing your left side to work in a balanced way. So it's been overstressed.
Which I think is one of the reasons why the body workers, the folks who are, in somatic movement and with movement practices are the people who have jumped on board, the people who really hear about biotensegrity. And it's like, oh my gosh, this explains what I'm finding in my practice. And so we have people very excited in these fields, whereas it's been much harder to affect a change in surgery or in the academic world. I think, Ava, do you have your hand up? Go ahead. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Good.
I
Now we
had a question about the other fellow was saying, I think his name is Bob, about the importance of where the strings attach, those notches.
Mhm.
How does that play into this whole thing?
Okay, I'm going to have to confess to you that I don't believe I can give you an accurate answer. The reason why is because biotensegrity is really bringing in tensegrity principles. Graham Scarr, who's a member of Trailblazers, I can remember him quite recently talking about how this attachment point is just, it's a limitation of the fact that we're building these models. In a pure tensegrity, this wouldn't be happening. And I don't really understand all that he was saying.
I think, Chris, it comes back to, and again, I'm not going to answer the question, but it comes back to, are we looking at the object or are we looking at the interplay of the forces? And the interplay of forces are very different than the object itself. So we can see the play of forces in the object, but the object is not the thing in the body.
Right.
Nu-
Yeah, I
Nuno.
think that's good. Go ahead, Nuno. You're muted. Thank
Sorry,
you.
it's not exactly about that that discussion. It's about something that you said before. So maybe.
Okay, go ahead. Before you do, I'm just going to say Louisa is responding to Susan in the chat, and what I'm going to do is welcome you to use the discussion point that we'll put up in the course as a way to respond, or the EB community discussion space, because we won't have time to talk about all of these things. So go ahead, Nuno, and then we're going to move on.
It's a silly question, but I know silly questions are important. And whenever I hear and I see that demonstration, especially in the model that you're using, that if one part moves, everything moves. So I see the model doing that, and I can feel if I have one of those models in my hands, if I put my hand on one top and I touch the string here, I can feel something happening there, always, everywhere. But I tend to be very, very plain. I don't know how to say it, in very direct in my interpretation. So when I try to think in the body, in the human body, as Susan was saying, the guy had something in his left hip, so I went to his right side, and the guy questioned why, and I said, yeah, because I feel those things. And for me, seeing that one moves, everything moves, why didn't you went to the foot? It would have to be, if something moves, everything moves. In my simple interpretation, I would say the head must have something to do with the hip that was wrong, or with the foot, or so everything needs to have everything connection, and it's not like that in the body. I have that experiential in myself. Maybe there's an influence, slight influence everywhere, but if something is wrong in my wrist, maybe it has to do with my ankle, but has nothing or has much less to do with my frontal head, or I don't know if I'm explaining. This is just a very simple reading of, if one thing moves, everything moves.
Yeah, go ahead, Susan. It would be a good time for us to talk about heterarchy too. But I
Yeah, I just want to clarify, all of the point I was trying to make was that you can't necessarily focus on the area of complaint. You do have to feel globally, and you have to allow yourself to follow through. So he came in with the left ankle problem, and I followed through it and went up to the right hip. So all I'm saying is that as a biotensegral structure, you can't just go into a reductionist view of biomechanics, how someone moves. You have to go through feel and kind of follow that trail of tension. And that's kind of where, and then with Louise, it's the same thing. Louise is asking about trigger points, and I'm going like, trigger points to me are not just structural pain, it's also emotional. So there's a lot of other things that interplay in some of these symptoms. It's not just tension.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm looking at the time and we're going to move on.